Okay, so paper 3, gender topic, Mrs. H, psychology, another revision video. This one is for part 8, social learning theory and the role of culture and media on gender roles. So let's have a look at a specific question. This was from spec paper 2 for the A level. Discuss the influence of culture and media on the development of gender roles. Refer to the report in your answer. Okay, so it's given you a STEM and we need to refer to that. So the structure of this is you really need to outline, first of all, social learning theory, use some specific evidence for culture and media, and then go on to evaluate, and in the evaluation, ensure that you link to the STEM. So let's have a look at this. What would we say about social learning theory? Right. Key terms, we need to make sure we're including plenty of key terms. Okay, it's not a chat in the pub. They are looking for very specific terminology that you need to make sure you have in every sentence. So let's start off with the theory. Here, social learning is all about nurture, that we learn our gender behavior from birth. Okay, so we learn from birth, from the environment, for example, parents, peers, media, teachers, culture. How do we learn? So we observe role models and we imitate their behaviors, and we can learn through vicarious or vicarious reinforcement, meaning that we don't learn directly, we're learning indirectly. It's possible for us to learn indirectly from the behavior of others. So watching other people be reinforced or punished for their behaviors. So that's what we mean here, vicarious or vicarious learning. So unlike the behaviors, we can learn without direct reinforcement. However, we know that reinforcement will encourage the imitation. So there are mediating factors that come between what we observe and whether we're going to behave, whether we're actually going to copy them. These mediating cognitive factors, those are things like attention. Do we notice particular behaviors? So here it would be gender-related, stereotypical ones. Retention. Can we recall those? Motor reproduction. Can we physically copy those? And finally, reinforcement. Are we likely to be reinforced for doing those gender behaviors? Okay, so factors that would influence who we choose to imitate. So who do we copy? The next little bit would be things like how similar the model is. So in other words, are they the same sex? Because this is all going to be gender related. How attractive to the observer are they? So in other words, for the child, for example, is it something that do they actually like something about them? We refer to with these, who do we copy? Personal and positional models. For example, those with high status, like celebrities, are more likely to be appealing to us. And we also refer to things like warm, nurturant models. So in other words, for many people, that will be people that are well loved, like their parents. Okay, so let's make sure we include the role of reinforcement in this. We have also direct, we've talked about vicarious learning, so vicarious reinforcement, but also we have direct reinforcement. So for example, parents, peers, teachers, they are going to reinforce us for particular behaviors, and we call that getting stamped in. Right, so those behaviors getting stamped in. So then when we talk about reinforcement, something that is more likely to strengthen that behavior, in other words, likely to get you to repeat it. And here again, this must all be gender related, these behaviors. So for example, a girl might see her mother modeling stereotypically feminine behavior, for example, doing domestic chores in the house, and the girl might copy her. If the girl is reinforced for that with maybe attention or praise, then she is more likely to copy that behavior. So we've just outlined very briefly the SLT. There's a lot of information in there, but now we need to go on to where is our evidence to support this. Okay, so we've got to refer specifically to the media and culture. Culture being wider society, parents, peers, and others. Okay, so let's have a look at this. So I'm just going to go through this, pause the video and listen to it again if there's anything you need here. But Furnham study. Okay, so it was a content analysis of 200 British TV adverts over a month, different times of the day. They predetermined categories as they would with content analysis. So their categories were things like whether it's a male or female voiceover, where was the adverts held, and so whether was it in a domestic setting or a workplace, etc. And also the central figure, were they male or female, and also the type of product. And what they found was that the males were seen more in more autonomous roles. So, for example, professional situation or as celebrities, more celebrity males. Females were seen in a more familiar role, for example, as homemakers. Females were definitely more in domestic settings, males in leisure or work. And they also found that 70% of the voiceovers were male. So showing very clear messages going out to, to the public, basically, and also children picking up on those messages. We also have Helen B. Okay, so Helen B. refers to Houston et al., who found that boys' commercials were fast, sharp, and loud, and girls were gradual, soft, and fuzzy with camera fades and softer music. And they found that children as young as 5 could watch an advert and tell if the advert was geared towards a boy or a girl toy. Okay, so we can have this here, a link to the STEM. The advert's aimed at girls that are not pink and fluffy as direct reference. And I would recommend that you use inverted commas, literally quote from the STEM. Houston, also children's books 50 years ago or so, they had 3 or 4 times as many boys as the main figure. Now it's more likely to be about 2 to 1 in favour of boys as the main figure. So again, children are definitely going to be picking up on this. We've got the Buzzy and Bandura study. The media promotes clear stereotypes, for example, men being independent, ambitious, and advice givers. But they found also that women were seen as dependent, unambitious, and advice seekers. And McGee et al. Children who have more exposure to media tend to display more gender stereotypical views in their behaviour, their own behaviour, and also in their attitudes. So plenty of research that supports the fact that media is portraying very specific stereotypes, and also that children will be picking up on those. If we go on to the research, specific research for culture, so we've got Mead's 3 tribes. So, for example, give something very specific. I know I've seen students give very general answers. We need specific if we're going to use these. So, for example, the Arapesh tribe, both the males and females exhibited gentle and responsive behaviours. In other words, similar to Western stereotypical feminine, caring behaviours. Whereas in the Chambulis tribe, females were dominant and males were passive and decorative. So supposedly the reverse of stereotypical Western gender behaviour. This all shows cultural influence on gender behaviour. It has to be socially determined as opposed to a biological thing. If there are tribes, if there are cross-cultural differences, it shows it has to be a learned thing as opposed to a biological. We've also got La Framboise. So gender roles among various North American Indian tribes were different from those in Western cultures. For example, the women were often warriors, which illustrates again that aggressive roles are not universally male, as it's kind of traditionally seen. We could also go on to parents and peers and the research here. So we have a lot of baby X studies. These are studies where the baby is given as dressed in neutral clothing, and they observe parents and adults to see how they behave, depending on whether the baby is introduced as a male or female. So the CV studies were one of the first. This was where they had a 3-month-old infant dressed in a neutral coloured baby grow. A third of the participants were told that the infant was male, another third was told they were female, and another were not given a gender label. Now, those adults were left to interact with the child for 3 minutes in a room with particular toys, for example, a ball, which was seen as a sort of stereotypical male toy, a rag doll, stereotypically female toy, and also a plastic ring, which was a gender-neutral toy. Results: when the baby was labelled female, participants were more likely to use the doll to interact with the child. When the baby was labelled male, they used the gender-neutral toy. Be careful with that, it was the gender-neutral toy in this study. When they were told nothing about the child's gender, female participants interacted freely with the child, whereas the male participants did not. So what we can conclude from that is that the adults will interact differently with the infants, depending on whether they believe they're male or female. Okay, so another study, the Langlois and Downs, they compared mothers' and peers' reactions when preschoolers played with the opposite gender toys. Okay, when the boys played with the girls' toys, the mothers accepted it, but the male peers rejected this and even hit the children, the little boys, demonstrating intolerance for cross-gender behaviour and the important influence that peers have on gender behaviour, even at that very young stage, okay, preschoolers. We also have ECCLs, and here we can use another link to the STEM. Children were encouraged to play with gender-typical toys by their parents. And here we could say that for boys, parents tend to buy competitive or combat toys as the STEM link. We've got Litton et al. Replicated this and found that parents praised sex role stereotypical activities of their boys and girls. Okay, we could also go on to peers, the influence of peers. So another one, Archer and Lloyd supported that, and they found 3-year-olds who played the opposite sex's games were ridiculed and ostracised, okay, left alone, isolated by their peers. So plenty of research there to show the influence, actual empirical research to show that we are having the children are going to be picking up on the influence of parents, culture, media, etc. So we need to then go on to discuss this. What are the problems with the research? So, for example, with Mead's research, there was a huge criticism about subjectivity and culture bias. In fact, specifically having an imposed ethic. She viewed their behaviour from a very Western viewpoint. And the question was, that the statement or the criticism really is that she was misinterpreting the behaviour in the tribes. So that would question the validity of the research. And nowadays we would accept that we should have at least one member of the local tribe in the research team to try to overcome this criticism. There's also the criticism that she was a feminist, and lots of critics say that she was not very objective. She was trying to find the fact that, that gender behaviour could be created from the environment as opposed to it being nature and biological. Okay, we also have, still with another problem with the research, another problem is that a lot of the research is correlational, or using the use of natural experiments without random allocation to the different conditions. So there are methodological issues. For example, they don't often have comparison groups of children without exposure to media. So therefore, a lot of this research is, as we say, correlational, that we can't conclude a causal link. We can't say that the media is causing this stereotypical behaviour. We could also have a look at this counter-stereotypical behaviour or counter-stereotypes. So if the media is responsible for reinforcing stereotypes, then, we should be able to use it to promote counter-stereotypes. And in fact, Pingy found that stereotypes could be reduced if children were shown adverts with women in non-stereotypical roles, which is all very encouraging. However, they also found preschool boys' stereotypes became stronger after seeing these non-stereotypical roles. So, the research is not always that simple, and the idea that we could counter-stereotype is not as simple as it seems. We also have Johnson et al. Showing that counter-stereotyping worked with 12-year-olds as well. We also further research, really support for social learning theory in general, is that stereotypes are changing, and yet biological differences are pretty much as they've always been. So gender behaviours must be linked to role models and the environment to explain these changes. Otherwise, we would just see a continuation of having the same behaviours for males and females, and that's not what's happening. Stereotypes and role models are changing, and people's behaviours, males and females' behaviour, is becoming more androgynous, and that suggests that it's a learned thing. Okay, remember androgyny with traits, the different traits, not what people look like, but their internal sort of characteristics. However, we've got a problem because the biological theory actually has a lot of concrete evidence. For example, the David Reimer case. Money's theory of neutrality said that one could raise a child neutral in gender, but the David Reimer case showed that that was not possible. It wasn't possible to override biological influences. Generally believe that innate differences are reinforced by, so we now tend to believe that these innate differences are reinforced by environmental influences. And so these days we would say an interactionist approach is much more complete and much more likely. And finally, age and social learning theory. And here again, you can link to the STEM. It seems there may be age differences that are not fully considered by social learning theory. In other words, developmental stages are necessary. So we can criticise SLT from that point of view. And here it seems that the STEM has, as children get older, there are differences, or what does it say? It says as children get older, boys and girls tend to have more shared interests like music. And so we can link to the STEM again here with age differences. So I hope that's useful for you guys, and quick run through to cover the SLT and media and culture. If you like it, please do. If you like this and you found it useful, please like it. Please subscribe. That obviously gives me some feedback as to whether these are being of use to you. And obviously, if there's anything constructive that you think would be helpful, please make a constructive comment. Thanks.